Welcome back to Closing Bell. There's one area of the market that's brought together a former NBA star, Speaker of the House, and a slew of billionaire investors. Yes, it's the explosion of SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies. These are listed vehicles that essentially collect cash from investors to fund a to-be-determined acquisition in the future. They've burst onto the scene in 2020 with a lineup of well-known faces. You can see them there, perhaps attracted to the prospect of deal-making, but there is no denying they have also been drawn to the dollar signs. On average, SPAC sponsors have raked in $72 million each in compensation based on an analysis of the 23 SPACs that were listed and announced transactions this year. The larger the deal, the larger the so-called promote, oftentimes, which for the best paid SPAC managers can exceed 9 figures. A promote typically equates about 20% of the SPAC's shares outstanding after its IPO. The SPAC manager acquires that stake for a nominal amount and often will invest a few $1 million as well to cover fees and expenses while that SPAC is in search of a target. But as SPACs have quickly become popular, some managers are lowering or even waiving their promote to entice targets to sell to them. That's just one indication just of this massive amount of frenzy that's really gotten into this area, Wilf.
And Leslie, so when do they get their payday? Not until they've made the investment.
That's a very good question. So they actually are locked up in the SPAC until about a year after that deal closes. So that is the typical conditionality for these SPACs, that they stay shareholders for a year. So really that wealth is on paper until they're able to sell. But, it's, I guess, better to be on paper wealthy than not on paper wealthy.
Well, that's certainly true. And my other question, Leslie, is of the portion of money that's gone into SPACs and been raised by SPACs this year, do we know roughly what percentage is still yet to be then deployed? I guess that would be quite a good indication of whether things are overheating and just money's been raised out of thin air for nothing.
It's a good question. The vast majority has yet to be deployed. Only about 23 companies have either announced or closed transactions that have also IPO'd their SPAC this year. I think there's upwards of about 150 SPACs that have launched this year so far year to date. So only a small proportion has actually even found their targets, which is the subject of tomorrow's piece on SPAC, which looks at just all the amount of dry powder out there chasing deals, the competition for those deals, what that means for valuations, and what that means for traditional deal makers like private equity, venture capital, and strategics that could be looking for the same targets.
Very nice indeed. Great pivot to preview ahead to tomorrow. More on that SPAC series from Leslie.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.